Hi everyone, Carter Krishnaiyer here for the Florida Soccer Report on Beyond the 90. Apologies up front. This isn't going to be my usual kind of enthusiastic self with this video as I'm fighting a pretty nasty cold that has come on the last few days and I'm feeling fairly under the weather. But had to tough it out for the finale of the USL Championship last night. Also, have to mention prayers and thoughts for all our friends in Jamaica who are going to be facing likely a Category 5 storm. This is something we all know about very, we can relate to here in Florida, especially after last season with Helene and Milton. So they are looking at Melissa not only being it's Cat 4 as we record this, it'll be a Cat 5 probably pretty soon, but it's also going to be a long duration storm, which is something we haven't really had to deal with in Florida since Hurricane Francis in 2004 sat off the coast for several days and moved at 2 or 3 miles per hour on an angle into made a landfall on the Treasure Coast. Similar situation here where this is going to kind of meander and sit for a while, pound them, and then make landfall. So it's going to be a horrible event. So let's get to the Rowdies. 1-1 draw with Detroit City, and therefore the season is over. Needed to win this match to have any chance of reaching the postseason. A lot of thoughts here. I'm going to try and be very simple with it and then maybe get deeper into it during the week. So Detroit City came into this game struggling. They have been in the last 3 months, I would say, every bit as bad as the Rowdies were the first 3 months of the season. And they've already lost their technical director in Trevor James, who's been with the club for a long time. And my understanding is that the coach, Danny Dichio, is probably going to move on after the season. There are limits in what they can spend. There's all kinds of things going on behind the scenes. And it's a shame because they're one of America's great clubs, right? In terms of supporters, in terms of just their story, they're one of America's great clubs. But they got the result they needed at Al Lang, which I did not expect. You heard me midweek say I thought this would be a 2-0 or 3-0 Tampa Bay victory. And Dom Casiato has done a great job since he's come in. But there are a lot of players that I think are now going to be moved out. And we know Leo Fernandez, we did tribute to him earlier in the week when he announced his retirement. Forrest Lasso, I'll probably talk about him during this week. He announced his retirement as well. We don't know what the status of Lewis Hilton is. He hasn't played in a while. So those are 3 guys that are Carl Rowdies players. Aaron Guillen, Lawrence White are guys that maybe it's time also on them. So the Rowdies have gotten back into the playoff picture because of guys they brought in. Azarcar, Alvarez, Mendez, Paul Marie, right? These are all guys that have been brought in during the course of the season. And the build coming into this season has to be heavily criticized because the team that they built was the worst team in the USL. In spite of some of the big names, in spite of guys who played well, even in MLS, like Castellanos joining the side. It just didn't go until they got Casiato in and they made some reinforcements. Ali Bassett was always injured. That was another guy. Dion Gabiri we never saw after his injury. Nick Moon, who played, I think, pretty well when he came on yesterday, although in the center of a lot of controversy, right? We'll get to that in a minute. But Nick Moon, there are 3 players, Bodily, Crisostomo, and Nick Moon, that I've consistently made cases for, that I felt like were really good signings for the Rowdies when they were made before last season. But Bodily has been injured too much, quite frankly, especially for a guy with his sort of game, which is based on pace, based on getting wide, putting in crosses, or cutting inside. He's been hurt too much. Moon is a wide player. He can play right back, he can play right wing back, he can play right midfielder if you need him to. He's been hurt too much. Again, another issue. Both those guys came from San Diego when San Diego folded. And then you've got Crisostomo, who had played his entire career on the West Coast before coming to Tampa Bay. I still think on paper and when he performs, he's one of the best in the USL Championship in central midfield. But those performances have been far and few between, although there were more of them toward the end of the season. Arteaga caught fire at the end of the season. I was dogging him all year, as you all know. Much better. Wubens Passius has been the standout player for the Rowdies this season, or guys that have been with the club the whole season, I should say. but he's on loan. I think he's going to be expensive to secure. Again, came through yesterday. Woobs came through again yesterday. So let's talk about the two, I think, talking points from the match, both which involved Nick Moon. One was the non-call foul, which led directly to Detroit's goal. I thought it was a good non-call, and quite frankly, from about minute 20, this is my disappointment with yesterday. Tampa Bay did not come out with the urgency they needed, given that they were at home, given that it was Forrest Lasso's last match, it was Leo Fernandez's last match. They didn't come out with the urgency they needed. I would say from about minute 20 to minute 60, even if Tampa Bay maybe had slightly better chances, Detroit was controlling the pace, they were controlling the tempo, and therefore probably deserved the result that puts them into the postseason. Quite shockingly, considering how bad they've been. And Detroit, for a club that doesn't spend very much, and that's part of the issue with the Trevor James and the Danny Dickios, they've made the playoffs 3 straight years. And that's twice as the 8 seed, but they've snuck in. And then the other incident, the non-penalty call, that's a bit closer. I think that the Rowdies have a legitimate gripe there. But not getting that call, there are calls they've gotten earlier in the season. I think really the bad call that stands out that went against the Rowdies this season to me was the penalty that was called on Bodley in Charleston, which was Robbie Nielsen's last match. He got fired after that match. That, to me, is really a bad call that stands out against the Rowdies. I think they've been the beneficiary of some... these calls even out over the course of the season, so I don't want to obsess about them. In the end, the Rowdies did not show enough urgency until Moon came on, until Leo Fernandez, making his final appearance. One of the great pros. You can go back and listen to James Knowles in my tribute podcast, 15 minutes all about Leo, that we recorded earlier in the week. That's until Leo came on, there wasn't the urgency, and therefore the season's over. And I'll just leave it at that. We'll have more on this during the week. There's really the whole entire Rowdy squad, I think, is going to be overturned now. The guys that might stay are a lot of the guys who were signed in the middle of the season, and then I would keep Crisostomo. I don't know what they're going to do about that. Passius, it's going to be very expensive to keep him. Maybe they have to, right? You don't want to be searching for another number 9 because Arteaga has been hit or miss this season. And then, or another guy who can play wide, right? If you're playing in the formation, if you play with a 3-man front line, you can, which is what Robbie Nielsen intended to do before the season. You can play Passius wide on the right side, and you can play him centrally if you're playing a 3-5-2, as we saw yesterday. But yeah, just very disappointing. The Rowdies this season were very disappointing. This is the worst season we've seen from the club since at least 2014. I think really since 2010. So this is a organization that has maintained high standards. I'm someone who obviously was very close to the club when I was the comms director for the NASL. So from 2010 to 2013, 14, very close to all the goings on with the club. That era with Ricky Hill was a glorious era. They had fallen off after Bill Edwards had bought the team, but then under the ownership of Stu Sternberg and the Rays, they emerged, and Neil Collins as the manager, they emerged right back at the very top where they belong. And this season was significant backsliding, back to maybe the 2014 level, maybe the 2010 level, which was their first season of this Rowdies 2.0 an organization where Paul Dalglish was the manager, and they were just chopping and changing, right? They just had an incompatible set of players. They needed a professional coach, a really professional coach at the time, to come in Ricky Hill and fix that, which he did very quickly in 2011. But now this year, at least, they made the change and got Casciano in early. So he's going to have the whole offseason. He's seen these players, he can assess them, and he's a very good manager. I think very highly of him. His CV speaks for itself. But because I know the kind of manager he is, I think you're going to see a lot of changes to this Rowdies side. I would be very, very surprised if there are more than 8 to 10 players on this squad that are back next season. I would put the limit, the ceiling at 10, maybe the floor at like 6 to 8. It's going to be a lot of changes.